think Ferguson should be seen as a mirror for all of America. In every community in this country, we have black and brown people who are being presumed dangerous and guilty, and it's following them into schools where they suffer higher suspension and expulsion rates. It follows them into department stores. It follows them into the streets. And that burden of being presumed dangerous and guilty is extremely frustrating and angering. And when you have incidents like Michael Brown being shot by an officer, that blows up. And we need to keep careful attention to what's going on in Ferguson, but we need to understand that in every community in this country where there are young black and brown men and women, that phenomena, that problem exists. And we are not going to deal with this issue if we just think whether this officer is indicted or prosecuted or not tells us something. We've got to really begin talking honestly about the legacy of racial inequality in this country and what it's done to all of us.
Your thoughts on the governor, Governor Nixon, quite astounding that is his name. But Governor Nixon of Missouri holding this news conference and announcing a state of emergency.
You know, it's just sort of like an old bad movie. It's like they're acting out this script that is exactly the opposite of what you should do when you're dealing with these kinds of issues. Declaring a state of emergency, declaring a state of crisis. The crisis for them really isn't what's happening with this officer. What the crisis is that people are actually exposing all of this bias and all of this tension and all of this frustration. And it's, I think, really quite misguided. It's going to create more problems than it solves. He's baiting the community by engaging in these kinds of tactics. And I just wish he was talking to people who understood the pain and anguish of people in Ferguson, the pain and anguish of people of color in many parts of this country. Because if he did, he'd actually be saying things differently. They'd be doing things differently. And I think we would have much less violence and conflict and tension. But because he's talking to the same people who are in that bunker down mentality, you see them repeating the mistakes that took place immediately after this shooting, taking this very militarized approach, gearing up, gunning up. And I think it's a very misguided approach to this issue.
You said in a TED Talk that went viral, the opposite of poverty isn't wealth. The opposite of poverty is justice.
We have so many people in this country that live in the margins of society, that live in jails and prisons, that live with disability, that live outside of the American experience in the way that most people think about it. And we sometimes throw things at them to make ourselves feel better about their existence, their reality, when in fact I really believe that poverty in this country is a function of our unwillingness to do justice to many parts of our community. And I really do believe that the opposite of poverty isn't wealth. I think, we have this arrogance. We think that when we make a mistake, we don't ever have to apologize. We don't actually have to rethink how we've behaved. We can just throw some money or throw some policy out there and move forward. I don't believe that gets you closer to deconstructing poverty.
I want to go back for a moment to Darren Wilson. Mm-hmm. If he is indicted and if he isn't, I mean, of course, we don't know at this point, but if he isn't indicted, what would you say to the people of Ferguson? And of course, this is so much bigger than Ferguson.
Yeah, I think that they should be upset. They should be angry. I would say you shouldn't be surprised. We haven't created an environment where people of color can be fully protected, because we haven't talked about what it means to be a person of color in this country. I think, we've never really told the truth about some basic realities. The legacy, we're doing a whole project on slavery, because I don't think we've ever told the truth about what slavery did to our thinking about racial difference. We told lies about people of color. We said that people of African descent aren't smart, aren't hardworking, aren't capable, and because of that, we should enslave them. And because we never confronted that, slavery didn't end, it just evolved. It turned into decades of racial terror, where we use violence and lynching and convict leasing and threats to sustain racial hierarchy. That's our history up until the era of Jim Crow and segregation. And then we codified these differences between the races. And even after the Civil Rights Movement, we never told the truth about all of the damage we did. We humiliated people of color on a daily basis for decades. My parents were humiliated every day of their life. I started my education in a colored school because I was told I wasn't smart enough to go to the public school. Those things accumulate. And because we haven't dealt with it, we now live in an era of mass incarceration where we intimidate and threaten and harass and menace people of color. And everybody feels it. And so we shouldn't be surprised if you don't get justice. What we should do is start talking about truth. And we've got to commit ourselves to a process of truth and reconciliation. And I hope without an indictment, we'll be more committed to telling the truth about our history and creating a new forward path.